Well, greetings and salutations, everybody. Welcome to the best day of the week. It's Star Wars Talk Tuesdays, where we get to talk about our favorite thing in the world, and that, of course, is Star Wars. I am, of course, your host, John Campea. It's an honor and a privilege to have you guys joining me for this weekly little Star Wars session here that we do. Want to give you guys a couple big disclaimers. Disclaimer number one, I'm still a little bit under the weather. I'm feeling much better than I was a few days ago, but I'm still going to have to pause and cough, and you're going to hear me like my throat's not doing so great, but I'll be okay through the show, no problem. And on top of that, I am on vacation right now. Yes, I'm still doing videos while I'm on vacation, but I'm not at home. I'm clearly not in my studio. Instead of using all my production equipment, I've got one little laptop, a little mobile camera, and a little microphone, and not so reliable internet, so there could be technical problems through this show. If there are, I apologize in advance, but I just want to give you guys that warning, that little heads up right away. Okay, so here's how today's going to go. Obviously, we're talking all about Star Wars today. So I've picked out 5 questions that you guys have emailed into me. How do you get an email question or topic on Star Wars Talk Tuesday? It's real simple. Just email me anytime at john@thejohncampeashow.com and put SWTT in the subject line. That's Star Wars Talk Tuesdays. Put SWTT in the subject line so I know that you're specifically sending in a question for Star Wars Talk Tuesday. Now, once we get through these 5 topics, we're going to go to the second half of the show where it's all your guys' live topics and questions for those of you guys who are watching live. So, with all that out of the way, let's jump into the first topic of the day. And the first topic today comes to us from Dale Cairns, who writes, there are some fans still in denial over the reveal about Rey's parentage, that for some reason believe that Kylo was the one who revealed this information to Rey. The movie made it fairly clear that Rey already knew, and Kylo, who had seen into Rey's mind to learn this information, pushed Rey to face the truth. Also, Maz says to Rey, you already know the truth. They are never coming back. All right, thanks a lot for the question, man. And by the way, I should have given this disclaimer off the top, guys. This is Star Wars Talk Tuesday. Star Wars Last Jedi has now been in theater for a number of weeks. This episode will be going into spoilers of Star Wars Last Jedi. So if you have not seen Star Wars Last Jedi, or you haven't already been spoiled for it completely already, you may want to stop this video and come back and watch it after you've seen the movie. Or maybe you don't care about spoilers, and that's totally fine. I just want to give you guys a warning about that. Okay, let's get to the question here. Damn, you're right about that. I cannot believe how many people... I've seen the film 4 times now. And I can't believe how many people still say to me, oh, I think Kylo was lying to Rey when he told her her parents were nobody. And I kept trying to tell people, guys, watch the movie. Kylo doesn't tell Rey that her parents were nobodies. Rey says her parents were nobody. All Kylo says to her, look, because remember, he looked into her mind, he knows. But he just said to her, look, you've always known the truth. You didn't just figure it out, you've always known. Say it. And she says it, my parents were nobody. She's the one who says it. He just knew it was true and encouraged her to just say it out loud because she's always known that her parents were nobody. And it is kind of crazy. And again, this goes back to this thing that I have been saying for years. I have said for years, Star Wars The Force Awakens makes it 100% clear that Rey's parents are, number one, not Skywalkers, and number 2, probably nobody significant because of that little speech Maz Kanata gave to Rey when they were down in the basement of Maz's palace. They made it totally clear. Look, their parents have the secret, that's behind you. The things in front of you, like Luke. Luke is in front of you. Your parents, all that stuff, behind you. And she tried to make that clear when she juxtaposed Luke being in front of her, but her parents being behind her. That made it 100% clear her parents were not Luke. But there are still, I find, some of my friends even, who have held on to this belief. No, Rey's a Skywalker. She has to be a Skywalker. I've been saying, no, she doesn't. She's not a Skywalker. But that was saying, well, Kylo could have been lying to her. Kylo's not the one who told her her parents were nobody. She said her parents were nobody. She's always known her parents are nobody. And like many children in her position would be, she's been in denial that, nope, my parents love me. They're going to come back for me. And I think that just adds to the character of Rey. But anyway, yeah, no, I absolutely agree with you. There's still a lot of people out there who seem to have watched the movie out of order and somehow they remember it being Kylo who comes up to Rey and says, your parents were nobody. And Rey goes, oh, they were nobody? No, it was Rey who said, my parents are nobody. She's the one who said it, not Kylo Ren. He just told her to say it out loud. That she's always known it was the truth. She finally said it. So that is still, it's crazy for the film being out for as long as it has. It is crazy to me how many people out there still have that thought that, oh, Kylo lied to her. Kylo's not the one who said it. Rey's the one who said it. And it's consistent with everything they said in the Force Awakens. So you're right. But just spread the word, folks. When you're in chats and things like that and you hear people bring up the idea, maybe Kylo was lying to Rey, mention it. Kylo didn't lie to Rey because Kylo's not the one who said it. Rey is the one who said it. She's always known that it was the truth. And Kylo just knew about it because he looked into her mind and saw it. So anyway, that's all I'll say about that. What are your thoughts on, what do you say to people when you hear them ask or suggest the idea that, oh, maybe Kylo was just lying to her? How do you approach that? Jump into the comment section and let me know your thoughts. All right, let's move on now to the next question. And the next question today comes to us from TJ, who writes, hi, John, and Happy New Year. Thank you so much, TJ. My question for you today is, which trailer do you think we will see first? Solo, a Star Wars story, or the second half of Season 4 of Star Wars Rebels? Thanks, and keep up the great work. Well, you know, it's funny. This kind of came up a little bit on the John Campea show earlier today. Somebody was asking again about the Solo trailer, and, you know, I'm the guy who I'm always telling people, don't worry about when a first trailer comes. Like this whole notion that, oh, a trailer needs to come out a year before the movie comes out. Then it's got to be out at least 6 months before the movie comes out. Don't worry, no, it doesn't. A first trailer doesn't have to come out that early. That being said, it is now 2018. It is now January. May is just around the corner. It ain't that far away from when we're supposed to, you know, when Solo's supposed to come out. And it is a little odd that aside from a few production stills that we've seen Ron Howard put out, that we haven't really gotten anything about Solo, let alone a trailer. Like, we're still forever away from that. I mean, it is odd. We haven't gotten an official poster. Usually you get an official poster and the next day the trailer drops. That's normally how the movie things go. Not always. There are many exceptions, but sometimes that's how it goes. And we have still not got that Solo trailer. And if you were to have asked me a few months ago, what do you think is going to come first, the Solo trailer or the trailer for the second half of Season 4 of Star Wars Rebels, I would have said you're crazy if you don't think it's the Solo trailer. The Solo trailer absolutely come first. No, I'm not so sure. And remember, and I brought this up earlier on the John Campea show too, I do believe there are still some conversations going on over at Lucasfilm and Disney about possibly moving Solo to December. I still think they're going to put it out in May. I still think that's when it's happening. I do. But I know there have been some conversations over there about moving it to May. Whether that's been settled or not yet, I'm not sure. But it's getting tight. Even I, the guy who always say, don't worry about the first trailer. The first trailer will come when the first trailer comes. Even I say that. But even I have to say, it is getting kind of questionable that we're not getting this trailer yet. So I'm going to go out on a limb and say we're going to get our teaser trailer for the second half of Rebels Season 4 first. I think we're going to get our next trailer for that first, and then maybe sometime after that we'll get Solo. Seems odd to say, but that's kind of the way it seems like it's going right now. I don't know. Let me know your guys' thoughts in the comment section below. All right, let's move on to the next question. The next question comes today from Joshua Toussaint, who writes, one of my least favorite moments in The Phantom Menace was Anakin flying and saying, let's try spinning. That's a neat trick. Then in The Last Jedi, we saw Kylo spinning and firing in his TIE fighter, and it actually looked cool, and now I don't hate the scene in Episode 1 as much. Did you catch this subtle reference, and what were your thoughts? Yeah, I did. I'm right with you, Joshua. When that moment happened in The Last Jedi, and Kylo pulls the spin, and it was completely took me back to Anakin doing his little spin move and all that kind of stuff. It totally took me back to that. Absolutely it did. And you're right. There's a lot that I hate about The Phantom Menace. I hate that scene. Let's try spinning. That's a neat trick. Woo! I mean, that was lame. So lame. But it does come across differently when Kylo's doing it. When Kylo's doing it, it seems like it's a skilled pilot warrior doing this incredible move, blah, blah, blah. Well, maybe it's not so incredible. Some little kid can go, let's try spinning. Woo! I mean, that did bother me a lot. But yes, I did catch the reference. I'm a little bit different from you. Catching the reference didn't make me appreciate the Anakin part of it. It made me appreciate the Kylo scene a little bit less. That's just me. I'm glad it worked out the opposite for you. I'm glad it made you appreciate the Anakin stuff a little bit more. For me, it just made me appreciate that what could have been a really cool shot of Kylo Ren doing his thing. It made me appreciate that scene just a little bit less. Okay, anyway, let's move on to the next question. The next question comes to us from K. Ricker, who writes, or Critcher, who writes, "Hey, John, been watching you since the AMC days. Thank you so much, Jay. What do you think about Kylo Ren and Rey's connection at the end of The Last Jedi? Some people say it suggests he will come back, he being Snoke probably, in 9. Could he know how to essence transfer like old Sith?" All right, thanks a lot for the question. This is another thing that comes up quite a bit when talking about kind of the things that Rey faced. Like, number one, did Kylo lie to her about her parentage? No, he didn't lie to her about her parentage. But the other thing is, if Snoke was the one that connected their minds, how is it they're still connected at the end of The Last Jedi? She's getting on board the Millennium Falcon for them to escape. How is it they still? Could Snoke still be around? To me, the answer is no. No. Snoke connected them across galaxies. They were solar systems apart from each other. He connected their minds so they could see and talk to each other and all that kind of stuff. But they've been connected. They're now connected. This is how I interpreted it at any rate. Maybe Rian Johnson will come out and say it's something different. But when I first watched the movie, the way I interpreted it as an audience member was they've been connected. They are now connected through the Force. It may have been Snoke who did it, but they're now connected through the Force. And remember, they were in very close proximity to each other now when they were on Crate. Because she's getting on the ship and he's probably only about 200 yards from her. So it's not like they were having to stretch out and be connected across galaxies or planet systems apart from each other. They were within a few hundred yards of each other. So I watched and I thought, well, they're connected now. They will always be connected. I think even going into episode 9, they're going to be connected somehow until their final confrontation. And so, no, I never interpreted that as an audience member that, oh, it suggests Snoke's still alive. Snoke's pulling an old essence transfer Sith thing. I never interpreted any of that way. To me, it was just as simple as they've been connected already, and now they're within just a few hundred yards of each other. And Obi-Wan and Vader sensed each other very strongly when they were both on the Death Star. So, really, I don't think it's any more complicated than that. I think people are just making it out to be a little bit more complicated than it needs to be. I really think it's just that simple. But then again, maybe Rian Johnson does an interview or does his commentary track on the Blu-ray and he says, Snoke's still around, guys. I don't know. Maybe that is the case. But again, my initial interpretation as an audience member watching that was just simply they're already connected. And now they're in close proximity to each other. I didn't see anything more beyond it than that. So anyway, that's just the way I saw it. How did you guys see it? Jump in the comments section and let me know. All right, we move on now to the next question. And the next topic comes to us from RK. And RK writes, I have no issue with Rey being powerful in the Force and being... let's try this again. I have no issue with Rey being powerful in the Force and being... and being a no one, as Anakin was. I also don't have any issue with her being good at fighting with a lightsaber, as she is gifted / self-trained in combat her whole life. My issue is her doing things like the Jedi mind trick in The Force Awakens and using force pull so easily without any training. All the Jedi we've seen have had training to use those skills. All right, thanks a lot for the question, RK. And I gotta ask you something that I've had to ask a lot of friends of mine who had certain issues with The Last... And remember, I have certain issues with The Last Jedi as well. I just saw it again for the 4th time. I love this film. But it's interesting. The things that bother me about The Last Jedi bother me even more every time I watch it. But the things I loved about The Last Jedi, I love even more. And overall, it's increased my appreciation for the film. But I have to ask you a question, RK. Have you seen the original trilogy? Because, you know, one of the things you mentioned in your question, and I get where you're coming from, How can she use force pull, pulling the lightsaber to herself? She's never had training. How can she do that? Let me bring up a little film called The Empire Strikes Back, where Luke Skywalker, who had all of about 5 minutes of some lightsaber drills on the Millennium Falcon, blocking some drone shots being fired at him. Luke Skywalker on Hoth, no Jedi training, hanging upside down in the Wampa's ice cave, and there's a lightsaber sitting over yonder. What did Luke Skywalker do? Having never been trained, having never been taught this, he closed his eyes, reached out, and brought the lightsaber to his hand, cut himself down. So when you ask, every Jedi who's done this in the movies had training. No, they haven't. And a lot of people forget that. Luke had literally spent a few minutes on the Millennium Falcon with Han doing some, remote control droid drills. That's it. He never learned, he was not with Ben and learned, the trick he pulled, the mind trick, control trick on the Gamorrean Guard. We never saw Yoda teach him that. He was only with Yoda for a short period of time. We never saw Luke. Luke never trained in a force pull, yet he was able to do it. So, to me, the notion that Rey shouldn't be able to do that seems inconsistent with the original trilogy. It was done in the original trilogy. They did that no problem in the original trilogy. Luke was able to do mind stuff in Return of the Jedi. After never really talking about it with Yoda, he was able to do the force pull with the lightsaber in the Wampa's cave, which is something that, Obi-Wan never taught him. And yet he was able to do that. And yet suddenly we have a problem with Rey being able to do it. To me, that is selective memory. No, I have no problem with that. I believe it's completely consistent with the movies and with the trilogy that we've had so far. It's like, it reminds me a lot too of like, some people would say to me, Luke is supposed to be a Jedi. A Jedi wouldn't just, when things got rough, just turn and run away and put himself into exile. Let me introduce you to a guy named Obi-Wan and this other little green guy named Yoda. So tell me again how no Jedi, when things get rough, would just run and put themselves in exile. Tell me about that again. Because it's happened. And it happened in the original trilogy. Tell me how it wouldn't happen here. Of course it would happen here. It just... Look, again, I have issues with The Last Jedi that I would talk ad nauseum about. The whole Canto Bight thing, the Benicio del Toro character, the way they shoehorned in Maz Kanata, the way they used Finn in this movie, the way they used Rose in this movie. I've got a number of issues that I will talk ad nauseum about. Absolutely. But there are some issues that some of my friends bring up that I just scratch my head and go, have you seen the original Star Wars movies? Like, did you ever actually sit down and watch those? Because what you're saying is completely in contradiction to what they established in those movies. Anyway, that's just my thought on that. I know a lot of people have a lot of different opinions, and that's totally cool. But that's just kind of the way I see it. So, yes. Rey being able to do force pull, doing some mind control tricks, stuff like that, it just all came intuitively to her. As the Force awoke in her, it just became intuitive. Luke didn't have training in it either, and he was able to do it. So anyway, that's just my thought. Take it for what you will. All right, guys, listen, it's that time of the show now for us to go to the live questions. I know a bunch of you guys have been sending in some questions here. 2 ways to get them on. Number one, send in the super chat. That's the one way to guarantee your question gets on. The second way is to use Twitter, and I will make sure we get to at least a couple of Twitter questions. I can't guarantee I'll get to yours, but I will try to get to a couple of Twitter questions here before the end of the show, so you can send them in on Twitter as well. All right, and again, the way you send in a tweet to me is just tweet to me at John Campea. Just fire off a tweet with at John Campea in it, and then I'll be able to see your tweet, and I'll get to a couple of those if I can. All right, now before we get to the live questions, though, it is that time for me to do my short 1-minute plug here, to do my admittedly shameless plug of the thing that keeps the lights on around here, and that's my Patreon campaign. Listen, guys, do me a favor. If you're somebody who watches my videos for any amount of time every week, do me a favor and head on over to www.patreon.com/JohnCampea. Check it out, and there you'll get a bunch of information that lays out, number one, what it means to be a Patreon supporter of mine, number two, how being a Patreon supporter actually makes these shows possible, and number three, what the benefits are of being a Patreon supporter as well. Check that out, and then maybe you'll decide to become a Patreon supporter and be one of the people responsible for these shows being able to happen. If so, awesome. Thank you so much. And if not, no problem. I'm just glad you're here being a Star Wars fan with me. Okay, with that out of the way now, let's go over to the live questions. We've had a whole bunch of them come in. So let's start off with this one. This one comes to us from Dr. Strangelove, who writes, "Hey, John, can you please comment on the rumor blowing up right now online that Mark Hamill didn't know his character was going to be killed off prior to the premiere?" All right, yeah, I saw this. Somebody made up this piece of BS that prior to the premiere, Mark Hamill had no idea that Luke Skywalker died, and that Disney did that to him as punishment for the way he talked about The Last Jedi going into it. It's utterly ridiculous. Nobody should have believed that in the first place. But to anybody who did believe it, Mark Hamill himself got on Twitter and addressed it. He just laughed at it. He basically called it pathetic that people would say that. And I can tell you, I was at the premiere. Mark knew that Luke died at the end. I can tell you that for certain. But Mark's also coming out and say he's confirmed that he did know it died, and his relationship with Disney and everybody there is fantastic. So Mark Hamill himself shot that down, and as somebody who was there at the premiere, I can also tell you Mark Hamill knew that Luke died at the end of that movie. So that was no surprise. Nobody knew. Somebody made up a big piece of BS, and other people are carrying it. But no, there was no truth to that rumor whatsoever. Mark Hamill got on Twitter himself to debunk it. Anyway, thanks a lot for the question. The next one comes to us from Angel Chang, who writes, "In The Last Jedi, we see Captain Phasma's armor being bulletproof. Yet she became a hostage in Force Awakens with guns. Wouldn't she just take the shots?" Well, there's two things to keep in mind about that. Number one, interesting piece of information. If you didn't know about this, in the novel Phasma, the Star Wars novel, the canon novel Phasma that's available, came out last year, or came out in the last few months. If I remember properly, Phasma actually went to an Imperial, like a crashed Imperial ship. And she took the metal plating off the ship to form her armor. She made her armor special for herself. That would be very, very strong and all that kind of stuff. So that's just a little bit of interesting background to the Phasma armor. Well, is she bulletproof? Well, remember, one of the things that Star Wars establishes is that the longer range that blasters go, the less powerful they are. So we see that in The Last Jedi, even capital ships. They can fire their blasters at something, but if something's a little bit out of range, the blaster might hit them, but it'll just bounce off their shields. But if you get into closer range, the blasts are more powerful, and they could do some damage. On the Starkiller base, yes, from a distance on the Star Destroyer, a shot at her from distance may just bounce off her armor. On Starkiller base, so when a gun's right to her head, that might not be as effective. So there's that. But also remember, they didn't capture her by jumping around the corner going, "Hey, Phasma," and holding a gun on her. It was Chewbacca had something to do with that. And Chewbacca still could have been there and torn her arms off, so there was that as well. So there are two things I would keep in mind. One, she was physically in danger from Chewbacca because Chewbacca was going to rip her arms off. Number two, just because her armor could deflect a blaster bolt from, say, 20 yards away, doesn't necessarily mean it could do the same thing at point blank with the gun put right up to the helmet. So that's a couple of things I would say. It's a great observation, though, that you brought up, but that's how I, as a fan, how I would explain it. All right, let's move on to the next question. Manuel Fernandez writes, "Could Johnson's new trilogy include a backstory for Snoke, like how the prequels included Palpatine's backstory? Or do you think it would be in a novel?" Yeah, I don't think they're going to touch Snoke again in the movies. I really don't. I think Snoke was handled the exact same way the Emperor was handled in the original trilogy. All we need to know is three things about the Emperor. He's the man in charge, he's real evil, and he's real powerful. That's all we ever needed to know about Palpatine in the original trilogy. That's all we needed to know about him. That's all we needed to know about Snoke. That's why when some people are screaming like, "They didn't explain Snoke," it's like, did you see the original movies? They never explained Palpatine either in the original films. It wasn't until a decade later when they did the stupid prequels that they gave some backstory to him. But I don't think they're going to address it, and I don't think Rian Johnson has any desire to. I think, and I've said this before, I will say it again, I think we will get a backstory to Snoke. But I think it's going to be the same way we got a backstory to Tarkin, and that's going to be in a novel. I think, as we speak, I think right now, somebody is writing that novel. I think Lucasfilm or Del Rey, whoever, has already commissioned a writer to write the Snoke novel. I think that's coming. I don't think Rian Johnson's movie will have anything to do with it, though. I think it'll be totally separate. All right, let's go on to the next question. And the next question comes to us from Iranian Gaming, who writes, Why were Rey, the Falcon, and Luke's map all in walking distance of each other on Jakku? Well, the same reason, probably for the same reason that Obi-Wan and Qui-Gon's ship on Queen Amidala's ship just happened to crash land, or they just happened to pull off and try to do repairs on the same planet that young Anakin Skywalker was hanging out in. And that reason is a standard Star Wars theme, which is destiny. Destiny is a standard Star Wars theme that we've seen happen a lot in the movies. Look, the Star Wars movies, all of them, include a lot of what on the surface appear like great coincidence that we then just recognize later on as a Star Wars theme of destiny. It was destiny that Qui-Gon was meant to find Anakin. And I think at some point Rey was meant to, take the Falcon and come across Han Solo. That Poe was meant and BB-8 was meant. I mean, there's an element of destiny to the Star Wars films that explains a lot of coincidence. So, as a fan, on my first viewing, that's just how I wrote it off. It's destiny. It's the Force Awakening. It's destiny that this happens. So, anyway, that's how I saw it. Just the same way that Obi-Wan eventually meets Anakin. It's the same kind of thing. It's major coincidence that we write off as destiny. So, that's how I look at it. Maybe you have a different sort of thought. Jump into the comments section below and let me know what you think. All right. Next question comes to us from Ben Rayner, who writes, better fight, Yoda versus the Emperor or Yoda versus Dooku? For me, it's Yoda versus the Emperor. I love that. I really like the Yoda. That's one of the few redeeming qualities about the prequels is their lightsaber fights. And I really did enjoy, and I love the Yoda fights. It's funny, even some prequel defenders don't like the Yoda lightsaber fights, whereas I'm a prequel hater, and I love the Yoda lightsaber fights. I really do. I think they're very entertaining. I think they're great. But between those two, I will take the Yoda versus Emperor one. I especially like the way it starts off with Yoda's being, bitch, please, and does this, and like the Emperor's guards are just out like that. But there's a lot about that fight that I love, so I'll take the Yoda versus Emperor fight. All right, so next up, Ben Rayner writes again, favorite moment in Revenge of the Sith? Mine is Darth and the Emperor looking at the Death Star. Timeline doesn't make sense with Rogue One, but still an awesome moment for me. I think probably my favorite moment in Revenge of the Sith is going to go back to what we just talked about, actually. It's the Yoda versus the Emperor fight. To me, I mean, that's really the fight. You can make an argument, say, from a dramatic point of view and from a narrative point of view, the fight is Obi-Wan versus Anakin. But if this was a UFC card, Anakin versus Obi-Wan is the co-main event. The main event is the heavyweight title for baddest man on the planet, and that baddest man in the galaxy. It's Yoda versus the Emperor. To me, that's the fight. And so to me, that's my favorite moment in Revenge of the Sith. Thanks a lot, Ben. All right, next one. Dr. Strangelove writes, petition to recast Leia with Daniel Day-Lewis. Well, Daniel Day-Lewis can do anything. I don't believe in movie petitions at all. I think they're all useless wastes of time. But that would be one I'd be behind. Daniel Day-Lewis as Leia. Sure, why not? If Cate Blanchett can play Bob Dylan, why can't Daniel Day-Lewis play Leia? Okay, let's move on here. I lost my spot. Maybe someday I'll find it. Apparently, a whole bunch of you guys have sent in more super chats. Sorry, guys. I will find it. Wow, there are a lot of super chats. Okay, guys, I'm going to have to cut in right now and ask, if you have not sent in a super chat yet, please send in no more super chats, because apparently I'm getting really far behind. All right, next one up is Ben Rayner, who writes, I know Return of the Jedi is your favorite of the trilogy, but would you say that Empire is a better overall movie? A New Hope is my favorite, but I acknowledge that Empire is a better overall movie, in my opinion. No, I think Return of the Jedi is the best. It's my favorite, and I believe it's the best one, too. There are certainly some things, some elements in Empire Strikes Back that they do better than they do in Return of the Jedi, for sure. Their dramatic beats are a little bit better in Empire Strikes Back, for sure, absolutely. But that in and of itself does not make it a better movie. I think all the different things they did in Return of the Jedi just make it the better movie overall. So, for me, Return of the Jedi is my favorite of the Star Wars movies. I also think it's the best made of the Star Wars movies. But, I know most people would think Empire Strikes Back, and that's totally cool too. That's not right or wrong. I have no problem with anybody who likes Empire Strikes Back or believes it's the better movie over Return of the Jedi. That's totally fine. That's great. But my opinion has been, and always will be that Return of the Jedi is the greatest Star Wars movie ever made. That's just my opinion. All right. Next question. We get to us from Lindsay Orgill, who writes, what would you like to see again in a Star Wars movie? I would like to see an epic lightsaber battle between Kylo Ren and Rey in Episode 9. Well, look, I'm going to tell you right now. I had this one discussion with a friend of mine who liked The Last Jedi very much, but he was very put off that we didn't get a legit lightsaber fight. Yes, there was lightsaber combat, but there wasn't a lightsaber fight in Star Wars Last Jedi. And that really put him off. He loved the movie, but that part put him off. And I'm like, a Star Wars movie doesn't have to have a lightsaber fight. You know, Rogue One had no lightsaber fight. It had some lightsaber violence for sure, courtesy of Darth Vader, but it had no lightsaber fight. I do not expect that we'll have a lightsaber fight in Han Solo. I'm fine that we didn't have a lightsaber fight in Last Jedi. However, even I will say, I'm looking forward to a lightsaber fight the way you've set it up. You've got to have that confrontation between Rey and Kylo Ren. I will go so far as to say it is more important for you to have that lightsaber confrontation between Rey and Kylo Ren than it was for you to have the lightsaber confrontation between Obi-Wan and Anakin in Revenge of the Sith. I think it's that vital. I think it's that important. So even though I'm the guy who's going, hey, I don't think it was fine that they didn't have a lightsaber fight in The Last Jedi. Even I will say you damn well better have that lightsaber fight in The Last Jedi. Or sorry, in Episode 9. You better have that fight in Episode 9. So I'm with you, Lindsay. I want to see that fight. That fight's got to happen. And not just that fight. I think there needs to be, I'm not going to say needs to be, this is what I would like to see. I'd like to see the Knights of Ren involved. I'd like to see a couple of the Knights of Ren finding Rey first and Rey having to beat them down first before building her way up to the final big boss, Kylo Ren. That's what I would like to see happen. Let's see what they do with it. All right. Thanks a lot. Next question comes to us from Rob Turner, who writes, what do you reckon porgs taste like? Probably just what they look like. They probably taste like chicken. You know, I like to think, too, that after that scene when Chewie was about to eat his porg on a stick, some good old-fashioned deep-fried porg, I have a feeling that once the camera went off of him, because remember, then the camera follows Luke onto the Millennium Falcon. I like to think that Chewie then went, well, guy's got to eat, and then ate it. So I hope he did, and I hope it tastes like chicken. All right. Ben Rader writes, could Rey still be a Kenobi, or is that theory dead? I think that theory's dead. I think any idea about Rey being from some lineage is gone. And I personally love it. I've been saying that forever. I still say it now. I love it. Because for thousands of generations of Jedi didn't have to come from a lineage. They were just born and the Force chose them. That's the way it was done. And that's the broom boy, and that's Rey. And I like that. And so I hope, certainly it is as the movie suggests, that all of Rey's lineage theories are wrong. She's not a Palpatine. She's not a Kenobi. She's not a Skywalker. She's Rey. That the light side rose up in. So that's the way it ends, I believe. At least I hope they keep it that way. All right. P. Ness writes, Luke struggled to use the Force in Empire Strikes Back. So how is Rey able to use Jedi mind trick, Force pull, the saber in The Force Awakens, and use telekinesis with the rocks in The Last Jedi, next to no training knowledge in the Force? Because where was it ever said, ever, that you need to have training in order to use basic Force powers? Tell me that. Tell me where it's ever written that nobody who is gifted in the Force can actually use any Force abilities unless they're trained in it first. Look, we've already explained the Rey thing with the lightsaber a million times. Rey has been fighting melee combat with weapons her whole life just to survive. So she's already a skilled person with melee weapons. And all the lightsaber is another melee weapon. And the Force moved through her, and the Force is very strong with her. You can make the argument that the Force is stronger with her than it was with Luke at the beginning. Remember, Yoda says to Luke, we are what they surpass. That is the true thing of all masters. I'm paraphrasing a little bit, but Yoda said to Luke, look, our pupils are destined to exceed us. That is what it means to be a master. The pupils will exceed us. That just like Luke exceeds Yoda. And so on and so forth. Rey, you remember, Snoke laid it out very clear. When he sensed something so incredibly powerful in Kylo, the most powerful thing he'd ever come across, he said, I warned Kylo that at some point, somebody in the light equal to him is going to rise up and the Force is going to rise up somebody equal to him in the light. I thought it was going to be Luke, but it's you, Rey. She is stronger naturally in the Force than Luke. So yeah, Luke could do a Force pull without any training. Yeah, but he struggled. Okay, he struggled. It came more naturally to Rey. I can throw free throws pretty good. Somebody else might come along who's just more natural at it, and they just do it better naturally. Luke was able to levitate rocks just by Yoda telling him, concentrate and do it. And he levitated rocks. Rey, at this point now, is a little bit more tuned into the Force. And she's able to levitate rocks. Nothing has ever said in any Star Wars movie ever that in order to execute basic Force skills, moving a rock, having a lightsaber fly into your hand, nobody ever said that required training to do that. She probably could have used some training to get bigger and better and stronger and mightier and all that kind of stuff. That's why, like, I think Rey is destined to become more powerful than Luke. But she isn't more powerful than Luke right now. In The Last Jedi, Luke is clearly more gifted, more powerful than she is by a mile. Remember when Rey and Luke started to have their little melee weapon fight? Luke kicked her ass. Like, he toyed with her till he finally knocked the stick out of her hand. Now, what he wasn't anticipating then, that she was going to turn a little stick fight into a lightsaber fight, and she pulled out the lightsaber. That changed things, yes. But when they were having their little combat, Luke was kicking her ass. He's far more powerful than her. He could do the Force projection across the galaxy because he's had time to hone that before he put himself into exile, apparently. So he's not as naturally powerful in the Force as Rey is. That's the message that Yoda gave. Luke is not as powerful in the Force naturally as Rey is. But Luke at that point is still far more powerful because he is trained. Rey executed some basic Force disciplines. Lifted rocks, pulled a lightsaber into her hand, and she fought with a lightsaber. Fighting with melee weapons is something she's done her whole life. I honestly, for the life of me, I got to be honest with you, P-Ness. To me, it really feels like people are just searching for something to complain about. Because everything that Rey does in this movie is completely consistent with everything we've had in Star Wars. It's completely consistent if you understand and know the originals and you actually understand and follow the new movies. They're consistent. And I do not know why. It's actually befuddling to me that people are having a hard time understanding this. But anyway, that's what it is. Look, all film is subjective. You saw it a certain way. I saw it a certain way. Maybe we have a hard time understanding each other's points of views. I respect that you have yours. I hope that you respect that I have mine. But yeah, it is a confusing thing to me that some people seem to find this to be a difficult thing to grasp. But anyway, that's just me. Okay, let's move on. Prince JP4321 writes, I wish Luke would have stayed alive. Oh, I'll be honest with you, so do I. So do I. But this is one of those situations that just because the movie did something I didn't want it to do, that doesn't mean I didn't think it was necessarily the right thing to do, or that it somehow hurt the movie because they didn't do what I wanted them to do. Did I want Luke alive into Episode 9? You damn right I did. Was I mean, when he died, I was overwhelmed. I really was. But amidst that overwhelming, was I a bit disappointed? Yeah. Yeah, I wanted Luke in the next one. But as movie fans, we can never confuse what we want to have happen in a movie versus whether it was the right thing to do in a movie. And we'll see where they go with it. But yeah, if you're just going to ask me straight up, do I wish Luke had lived? Yeah, I do. Because Luke is my all-time favorite Star Wars character. Of course I wish he had lived. So absolutely, yes, I agree with you there. All right, moving on. Siobhan Dixit writes, didn't Luke kiss Leia on the forehead when he was projecting himself? Did she realize that he wasn't really there? If yes, Why was it Poe who concluded that Luke was just trying to stall and not Leia? I think Leia did know. I have nothing to back that up with, though. It is my gut feeling as an audience member that she knew, and she knew the whole time, that Luke wasn't really there. I think, and probably she was the only one. I don't think Poe realized he wasn't there. I think Poe thought Luke was just going out to sacrifice himself to buy the rest of the Resistance time to escape. I don't think, the way I interpreted it, maybe I'm wrong, the way I interpreted it, I did not see Poe realizing that Luke was there as a Force projection. The most unbelievable, powerful use of the Force the galaxy has ever seen. Luke doing that, which is a great way for him to go out. But I do believe Leia knew, and I do believe Poe didn't know. So, again, we might hear Rian Johnson talk on the Blu-ray features and completely contradict what I just said. That's possible. That's, as an audience member, that's how I saw it, at any rate. Devontae Brown writes, Rian Johnson said Rey's parents' truth is still open. No. That's been totally misinterpreted completely. Here's what happened. Basically, there was an interview. And Rian Johnson, it is crazy how people take these things and run with them and make these grand narratives out of them. Rian Johnson said, basically I'm paraphrasing, but here what it is. Hey, JJ's movie is 9. 9 is JJ's movie. If JJ wants to go back on some things and change some things and do whatever, he can do that. Because it's JJ's movie. But what people have done with that is they've started, I've seen on Twitter a lot of people running with, Rian Johnson said that it's not necessarily that Rey's parents are nobody. No, he said that JJ could do it if he wanted to, but there's been no indication that JJ is going to do that. I do not believe for a second that JJ is going to retcon what they did in that, because if they had a big problem with that, he is the executive producer, Kathleen Kennedy's the head of Lucasfilm, they would have stopped Rian Johnson from doing it. If they had a big plan with them revealing, as they had right from The Force Awakens, that Rey's parents are nobody. Remember, it was JJ who set up the fact that Rey's parents were going to be nobody. He made that 100% clear, as far as I'm concerned, in The Force Awakens. So, all Rian Johnson said is that, hey, look, Episode 9 is JJ's. If JJ wants to do something different, JJ's can do something different. But he was in no way, shape, or form saying, I didn't really answer the question of Rey's heritage. He did not say that. And there are some people going around online passing it off as if, Rian Johnson was actually backtracking what he did with Rey. He did not. JJ knew about it. JJ's not going to backtrack on it. Her parentage is not open. All right? It's done. Hey, look, and I will say this as somebody who likes what they did with Rey. If JJ and Kathleen Kennedy come up with some great idea that would require them to backtrack on anything Rian Johnson did in The Last Jedi, I'm all for it. Do what's best for the movie. And if JJ and Kathleen Kennedy, who gave the green light to them making Rey's parentage being nobodies, if they come up with some magnificent idea for Episode 9 that requires them to change anything about Rian Johnson's Last Jedi, I say do it. Go for it. Do whatever is best for the movie. And I'll be okay with it. But there is nothing to suggest at all that Kathleen Kennedy has changed her mind about it, that J.J. Abrams has changed his mind about it, or that Rian Johnson has changed his mind about it. It's just that simple. So let's see what happens, but there has been nothing to indicate that J.J. or Kathleen Kennedy have any plans to backtrack anything that they approved Rian Johnson to do in Episode 8. So there's that thought. All right. Next one. Manuel Fernandez writes, better pilot, Anakin, Han Solo, or Hera Syndulla? I'm going to say Han Solo. Yeah, in his day, Anakin was the best starfighter in the galaxy, but I'm just going to go the absolute best naturally gifted pilot was Han Solo. Going back to the whole using the Force stuff without being trained. Qui-Gon said himself, Anakin is the best pod racer because he uses the Force. He can see the events happening. He was never trained, but it was a natural gift. He could see things before they happen. He could anticipate stuff, blah, blah, blah. Same thing with piloting a starship, man. He had no training in the Force to do that. He was just able to do it. So there you go. Let's see. Next one. John Hine writes, I saw a rumor Colin Trevorrow didn't want to follow Ryan/Kathleen's vision for Luke. And his ideas for Luke were to be much more involved. You buy this? No. Because he would have known right from the beginning that Luke wasn't surviving into 9. Doesn't matter what ideas Colin Trevorrow had. They would have let him know. The first thing they would have sat down and told Colin Trevorrow in talking about 9 is, here's where things are going to be at the end of 8. That would have been the first conversation. You can't have any other conversations until you have that first conversation. Okay, you want me to make 9? Great. Where does number 8 end? What's our situation when we start? So don't think for a second that they hired Colin Trevorrow and Colin Trevorrow and the screenwriter started putting together a draft of 9, only later to go, what? Luke dies at the end of 8? What? No, that is not what happened. There is no way that is what happened. Colin Trevorrow knew in his first conversation with Lucasfilm that Luke dies at the end of 8. And they were obviously, at least on the surface, got on the same page enough that they hired him. So I believe problems came up, had nothing to do with the fact that Colin Trevorrow wanted to use Luke in number 9. Unless you're talking about him using a Force Ghost Luke, which is possible. Unless he was talking about a Force Ghost Luke, no. Colin Trevorrow already knows that Luke dies at the end of 8. And that just kind of ends that discussion right there. So, and by the way, I do believe we're going to see Force Ghost Luke in 8. I do. And I believe he's going to train Rey as a Force Ghost. I think he's going to do some more training for Rey. So anyway, there's that. All right, let's move on. Ben Rayner writes, Snoke is dead. A fly flew through his mouth, I think. I don't recall seeing a fly in his mouth. I remember that shot when the camera goes back to Snoke's throne room. His face on the ground, his eyes kind of crossed, and the tongue hanging out of his mouth. I thought that was a hilarious shot. I don't recall seeing a fly go into it, but if they did that, nice touch. I don't remember it, but if they did, it's a nice touch. All right. Bizarro Pat 345 writes, chances of Jabba, Boba, and most importantly, Max Rebo showing up in Solo. Thanks, John. Love listening to you talk Star Wars. I think there's a pretty good chance. By the way, I don't know this. No one's told me anything. I have no insider information as far as this goes. But I would suspect that we would see Jabba. Even if it's just in one scene or something. I would suspect we would see Jabba, maybe even Boba Fett, in the Solo movie. Because it seems like when we meet Han Solo that interacting with Jabba wasn't just a one-time thing. It seems like he had to have dealings with and interacted probably with Jabba and his henchmen, probably on a semi-regular basis. So I'll go one step further. I'll say this. I think I'll actually be a little bit surprised if we don't see Jabba in the Solo movie. It just seems to make sense to me that he would already be having dealings with them. So I think we are going to see them. Max Rebo, probably not. Time to retire Max Rebo. But as far as Jabba, I think yes, we'll see him. Boba Fett, I think there's a good chance we'll see him. Max Rebo, no. I don't think we'll see Max Rebo. All right. Next question comes to us from Infinite Games, who writes, Hi, John. Greetings from Saskatoon. I lived in Saskatoon for over 6 years. I love Saskatoon, Saskatchewan, Canada. I think having Phasma pursue Finn and Rose through the movie would have made both arcs far more interesting. Absolutely agree. Because that would have solved a couple of the problems of The Last Jedi to me. Problem number 1. Again, Phasma completely misused and underused. Number 2. The whole Canto Bite scene and sequence, pointless. If you even did Canto Bite, but right from the beginning of the movie, you have Phasma talking to Hux, asking permission to hunt down FN 2187, to hunt him down. And that she's right on their heels throughout the movie until finally it culminates in the same way that it did in the movie with them on the Star Destroyer and she's got them now. Absolutely. I think that would have fixed, or at least taken a few steps to fixing some of my bigger problems with the movie. So I love your idea, Infinite Games. Having her pursuing them throughout the film, I think would have solved a couple of the problems with the movie. I absolutely do. Great idea. All right. Next one comes to us from Shivam Dixit, who writes, how did Snoke connect Rey and Kylo using the Force? Snoke didn't even meet Rey up until that point. Too convenient, he only knew of her existence. It's the Force, man. It's the Force. He's a Sith user. He's a mighty powerful dark side of the Force user. How did he do it? Well, how do you make a lightsaber fly from there to into your hand? The Force. There's just some things in Star Wars that we just have to accept the mystery of it. How does Snoke utilize the Force to do that? Well, he just does. And look, we had to say the same thing with the Emperor on a few things that he did. We had to say the same thing with Vader a couple times. I have absolutely no problem with that. That to me is not an issue at all. To me, it totally makes sense. All right, Orange Hand writes, Poe's big smile when he met Rey. Does he like her? I think so. Remember, in the novelization of The Force Awakens, Poe and Rey actually meet in The Force Awakens. They didn't do that in the movie. So much for saying that the novelizations of the books, or the novelizations of the movies are canon. So much for that. Because in the novelization of The Force Awakens, Poe and Rey meet. And then they meet again in The Last Jedi. So there goes that. But anyway, there was implied some attraction in the novelization. But then again, that might be thrown out the window. The way they meet in The Last Jedi, could that have been them implying that there could be a romance later? Maybe, maybe not. I don't know. I'm not going to read too much into it either way. But it could be. Totally could be. James B. writes, I can't help thinking if Rey was a dude, the whole too powerful thing would be a moot point. Hey, look, you're not wrong. You're not wrong. Look, Luke did a whole bunch of things untrained that he never had any lessons in, and he did them, and nobody batted an eye. Wait a minute. Nobody asked. Nobody asked. Wait a minute. Luke hasn't had any training. How could he turn off a computer targeting system that even the best fighter pilots in the galaxy were using and could not hit that target? Yet he was able to turn it off, close his eyes, tap so deeply into the Force that he could instinctually know when and how to fire that gun. Nobody did that. Nobody asked that question. They just went, the Force is with him. And that was good enough for us. The Force is with him. That's how he was able to do it. No problem, and everybody was cool with it. Wait, Luke never trained how to force pull a lightsaber to his hand. How can he do that? Nobody asked that question. Nobody said, wait a minute, Luke never got any lessons about mind controlling, Gamorrean guards. How did he do the Force choke thing to the Gamorrean guard? And the pig choked him out. He never had training in that. He's a Mary Sue. Nobody ever did that. We just all went, the Force is with him. But Rey, she's a chick. She can't do anything other than make my sandwich and clean my plate. Like, she can't do any of that stuff. That's ridiculous that she should be able to do that. No problems that Luke did it, no problem. But Rey does it, people have issues. And that is a little bit confusing to me, I must admit. Anyway, Iconic Comic writes, hey John, what is your prediction on how much China will bring in for The Last Jedi? It opens January 5th. I think a lot of people who are disappointed in the current box office forget it hasn't opened there yet. I don't know how anybody is disappointed at a film that's crossed $1 billion in 17 days. Wrap your heads around that. The Force Awakens, in just 16 days, became the #1 film of the year domestically. It beat Beauty and the Beast was the #1 film. It became the #1 film in just over 2 weeks. For the entire year of 2017, #1 film. It was the second fastest film in movie history to cross $500 million. It's already crossed the $1 billion club. Something, by the way, no DCEU movie has ever done. None of the 5 DCU movies have even come within like $100 million of reaching the $1 billion club. Star Wars The Last Jedi did it in just over 2 weeks. It took the second smallest third weekend drop in film history And yet there are still people saying that they're disappointed with the financial results of Star Wars The Last Jedi. Now, none of those numbers I just threw out there should have any influence about whether you like the movie or didn't like the movie. Like, if you didn't like The Last Jedi, just because it's making money at the box office should not change your mind at all. I'm not suggesting it should. It absolutely shouldn't. But if Star Wars The Last Jedi completely flopped at the box office, let's say it made $300 million by now, if you liked it, that number shouldn't make you think you shouldn't like it either. It goes both ways. Like, having financial success doesn't mean you should like it. If it financially failed, doesn't mean you shouldn't like it. They're just numbers. It's just, how many people are interested in going to see it. That's all it means. As far as the China thing goes, I don't know, like, people are not as into Star Wars in China as, say, they are in Japan. Like, Japan is Star Wars crazy. China, not so much. So honestly, I don't expect it's going to do all that much in China, to be honest. I think it'll do okay numbers for China. I'm not expecting it to change the game. I'm really not, to be honest. Maybe it'll surprise us. I'm not expecting it to change the game. Let's see. Pensive Ruin says, Obi-Wan and Yoda went away due to Order 66. So they ran away. Hey, that's fine. Just, they ran away. Yoda ran away. He went into hiding. Luke had his own reasons. Luke, and I love the speech that Yoda gives to Luke. Luke saw himself as a failure. Luke thought his very presence was doing more harm than good. He believed, wrongly, Luke believed he ruined everything. And he sent himself into exile. So whether it was Order 66, or whether it was the fact that he just had his ass handed to him by the Emperor, or whether it was the fact that he saw himself as a failure and was doing more harm than good to the rest of the galaxy, each one of them had their own reasons for going into hiding and going into exile and hiding themselves away from the galaxy. Again, nobody goes, the Empire was dominating the galaxy. How could Obi-Wan and Yoda stay in hiding while all of that was going on? While all that evil was going on out in the universe, why didn't they come out of hiding and do something about it? Because they felt they couldn't. And they felt what they needed to do was to be, Obi-Wan thought he needed to be on Tatooine for his reasons. Yoda thought he needed to be in exile on Dagobah for his reasons. Luke thought he needed to be in exile on the island for his reasons. But each one of them faced their own reason, their own thing that they had to overcome. And I love what they did with Luke. And that is the funny thing to me, is that it seems to me that some people who didn't like The Last Jedi, and it's totally fair, all film is subjective. I got no problems with anybody who didn't like The Last Jedi. That's fine. That's great, actually. All film's subjective. I mean, I don't like some films that other people like and vice versa. I mean, that's being a movie fan. But it is funny to me that some people, one of their big problems was that the way the story they had for Luke, to me, it's the most awesome, authentic, real feeling story they could have possibly done with Luke. I love what they did with Luke. And nobody wanted to see a Luke Skywalker in The Last Jedi pulling out his lightsaber, cutting down 50 stormtroopers, taking out bunches of Knights of Ren, and send Kylo Ren running with his tail between his legs. Nobody wanted to see that more than me. But I got something different. And what they gave me, I thought, was brilliant and awesome and moving and emotional and just made Luke such a better character to me overall. That's the way it worked for me. It didn't work that way for other people. And that's totally fine. That's what being a film fan's about. Okay. Iconic Comic writes, thank you for answering our questions and for inspiring our channel to be bigger. Well, you're welcome very much. I'm glad I could be helpful. Lance Pro 85 writes, hey, John, what time does your daily show start now? While I'm on vacation, starts at different times. It starts whatever I feel like doing it and whatever fits more into my vacation plans. Like, for instance, today, I got plans with my family. So I couldn't do the John Campea show at my regular time and then Star Wars Talk Tuesday at my regular time. I have plans with my family later. I'm on vacation. So I had to move everything earlier. So while I'm on vacation, again, when I'm back in Burbank, The John Campea show's at 10 a.m. Pacific Standard Time, 1 p.m. East Coast Time, when I'm back in Burbank. While I'm on vacation, keep a close eye on my Twitter because I'll let you know every day what time the show's going to start. But it's anywhere between 8 a.m. Pacific Time and 1 p.m. Pacific Time. Or, sorry about that. 8 a.m. Pacific Time and 10 a.m. Pacific Time. Somewhere in that window is probably when I'll do it every day while I'm on vacation. All right. Dave A. Covey writes, delaying Solo means delaying tie-in merchandising, hurting the second quarter profits of those that make/sell them. Could a fear of hurting their relationship with these businesses be why they don't want to delay? No, they may not want to delay because they're ready to go. They've always planned on this movie being a May release. If they feel the movie's ready to go, that's the only reason they don't delay is because they're ready to go. They have the movie ready to go. And believe me, you know, my wife, you guys know my wife works for Hasbro. Hasbro, if delaying the movie would make the movie better, a better movie equals more toy sales, the toy companies like Hasbro would be perfectly fine with that. If something's going to equal more toy sales for them, they'll be fine. But no, the reason they're not delaying it is because they don't have a reason to delay it. In their opinion, they've got everything together. They've got everything ready to go, as far as we know. Maybe we'll find out in the next few weeks that they are delaying it, and that'll change the narrative. But for now, it's not why don't they delay it. The actual thing is they don't have any reason to delay it. If everything's on schedule and they've got everything ready, there's no reason to delay it, so why would they? That's really the question. Thanks a lot, Dave. All right. Next one comes to us from Bizarro Pat 345 writes, thoughts on Dooku played by the legendary Christopher Lee. Love the concept of an older, more experienced Jedi falling to the dark side. Underrated, in my opinion. This is one of those things about the prequels that I believe was maybe poorly executed, but in concept was great. And there's a number of things in the prequels to me that in concept were quite good. Dooku was not fleshed out and really made to be the character he could have, but the concept of the character, as played by Christopher Lee, as this old veteran Jedi who just finally had enough, seduced in by Sidious, turns to the dark side and becomes a very important piece in Sidious's overall plan to take over the galaxy. It was a wonderful idea and a wonderful character. Again, I think they could have executed it much better, as in many things in the prequels, but I think conceptually, the Dooku character is fantastic. Let's see. The Jumengo writes, Happy New Year. Thank you so much. Don't agree with take on Kathleen Kennedy. Framed like she needs to have a hit after hit. Her position is much stronger was Lucas heir before Disney. You didn't quite word it right. Look, I'm not saying, because we talked about this on the John Campea show a little bit earlier today. Some people are asking, what happens to Kathleen Kennedy if Solo is a flop? And what I said was, her position could become precarious, not just because Solo was a flop, though, but because if Solo flops, it'll make the other struggle she's having right now come more into the spotlight, which is primarily her inability to get on the same page with the directors, get the right directors on board from the beginning, and get on the same page with them. That's her main job. That's her main job. And we've had no less than 3, some would argue 4, but no less than 3 situations in her short tenure as the leader of Lucasfilm in hiring directors that she was never on the same page with in the first place. She either failed to understand what their vision was, or she failed to communicate her expectations to the directors, and then those relationships fell apart. 3 of them, minimum. Now that's fine right now, because every film they've put out has been a smash financial hit. So that's fine. Every single film they put out so far has joined the $1 billion club. One of them has joined the $2 billion club. So that's fine. But if Solo flops, it's not just going to be Solo that's the problem. I think it's going to cause some people to look at some of the other problems they've been ignoring. Primarily Kathleen Kennedy's, and I love Kathleen Kennedy. I want her running Lucasfilm forever. But if I'm going to try to be, objective, she has struggled in getting the right directors on board and making sure they're on the same page. She has fundamentally struggled at that. It's well documented. And I think if Solo flops, and I don't believe for a second Solo is going to flop, but let's say Solo flops, makes $400 million worldwide. That would be a flop for a Solo movie. And that would mean that it would lose money. It's probably going to make $800 million, $900 million. It's going to be totally fine. But if it did flop, the problem isn't going to be that Solo flopped. The problem is going to be that Solo flopped, and now let's look at these other problems that we had been ignoring. And that could become an issue. I'm not saying it should. I'm not saying it will. But I am saying that in the way the corporate structures work, that could then become an issue. I say all the time, winning cures everything. Right now, Star Wars is winning. Every film's joined the $1 billion club. So some problems with directors, whatever. Winning solves everything. Nobody's minding it. Nobody really cares that much. But if the moment they lose, if Solo flops, those problems that winning has been covering up will come back into the limelight, and I believe could cause problems. And I think Kathleen Kennedy could be on thin ice if Solo flops. But again, I don't believe for a second that Solo is going to flop. I think it's going to make $800 million worldwide. It's going to be very profitable for them, and then they'll move forward. So that's how I think it's going to happen. At any rate, we'll have to wait and see. Reggie Phoenix writes, where did Reggie Phoenix go? There he is. Reggie Phoenix writes, did you think it was weird that Poe and Rey met in the novelization of The Force Awakens but didn't know each other in The Last Jedi? Does this take away from the book credibility? Well, you probably wrote that after I mentioned it earlier. Yes. As a matter of fact, I remember me and Christian Harloff, because we were both at the premiere and we were talking afterwards. And like one of the first things, oh no, it wasn't when we were face to face. I remember I texted this to him afterwards. One of the first things I texted to Christian, because we were going back and forth a little bit, I said, wait a minute. It's like, I thought novelizations were supposed to be canon. This movie just completely contradicted the novelization of the last movie. What does that tell us about canon? And both me and Christian were both like, I don't know now. Don't know. I guess we're going to have to ask Pablo and see how that goes. But honestly, yes, that is very odd. It is very strange. It is an oversight. And what's canon now? We'll have to wait and see. But yeah, I completely thought that at the same time too. All right. We Are Rip City writes, what's up? I know you've had your ups and downs with Rebels, but I think everyone can agree we love Kanan. Where does he rank in your canon characters? Oh yeah, I love Kanan. I do. And you know what? I will admit, my appreciation for the character was increased even more by the fact that I was very privileged to get to know Freddie Prinze Jr., who does the voice of Kanan. And not because, I just met Freddie Prinze Jr., but because sitting down and talking with Freddie and his love for the character and listening to Freddie talk about his insights into the character and what he sees as the different layers of the character, talking to Freddie about that just gave me an even greater appreciation for the character himself. And Freddie's great. I know I give Freddie a hard time when I was doing movie trivia stuff and he would be an opponent and I would talk all sorts of smack, but that's all just for camera. I have a huge amount of respect for Freddie Prinze, not because he's a Hollywood actor or anything like that. This is a guy, and maybe I shouldn't even be saying this, but I remember sitting down talking with Freddie, and the topic came up about, hey, what about you? Would you want to physically be in a Star Wars movie? And that came up, and he said, nah. It's like, really? You wouldn't want to be in a Star Wars movie? He goes, it depends, man. But seriously, if that means having to leave my kids and leave my wife, leave my family for like a month or whatever and be away from my kids, he goes, I just can't see me doing it. Don't want to do it. And I tell you, right there, I'm sitting there listening to this guy. It's like, you are a true dude, man. This is a true man. And I have a huge load of respect for Freddie Prinze. He also wrote one hell of a cookbook. And now it sounds funny, but read his cookbook. His cookbook is great. It's for guy. I'm telling you, if you're a guy and you're all thumbs, it's really good for you too. Check out his cookbook. But getting to know Freddie really made me appreciate even more the notion of Kanan and the character. And Freddie and I will still text once in a while. Like I remember we were at Celebration texting and things like that. And he's emailed me once or twice. But great guy. Really made me appreciate the character anymore. Where do I rank him? I don't know. I would have to sit down and think about how do I rank my Star Wars canon characters. I'm not sure. But I definitely have a lot of respect for the character. I do. All right. Sorry, guys. This is running a little bit long, but that's okay. We'll finish this out. Next one comes to us from Noah DeGarmo. Noah DeGarmo writes, do you think the Solo movie will address why he doesn't believe in the Force despite the Republic existing like 20 years ago? Probably, yes. I think in Han Solo, I don't think we have a Force atheist. I think in Han Solo, honestly, I've always seen Solo as a Force agnostic. And that's how I've always seen him. And I think we probably will come across some sort of scenario or situation about maybe how he got that way. I think that would be interesting. Maybe he had something really rough happen to him. It's like, why didn't the Jedi come and save us? Or something like that. That might turn him to become a Force agnostic. Something like that. I do think they'll address it, actually. I hadn't thought about it, but now that you bring it up, yeah, I think that's totally possible. Thanks a lot for the question, man. All right, 3 questions left. The Jumengo writes, John, love when you educated fools about the Force in the original trilogy. Don't want to start a war, but it's a prequel thing. But it's a prequel thing that Jedi must take college courses on the Force and accumulate points to upgrade your avatar. Well, I don't think the prequels really did that. I think the prequels were really good about just no. The prequels aren't about the Jedi going into the Jedi Temple to get the Force and to be able to use the Force. No, it's about taking those skills and those powers they have, teaching them the right way to use them, how to use them, why to use them. And it's really more, the Jedi training was also about imparting the philosophy of the Jedi more than about just using your powers as a Jedi. So I actually don't think, as many of the things wrong that I think the prequels did, I've never seen the prequels getting that wrong. I don't think the prequels have ever instilled an idea that you have to get college credits in order to be able to use the Force. I've never gotten that sense before. Because guess what? Even if they had sent Anakin away, Anakin already was tapping into the Force. Anakin was already using the Force. In pod races and piloting and all that kind of stuff, he was going to be able to use the Force. It's just that he wouldn't have done it under the governing hand of the Jedi. So I actually don't think the prequels do it that badly. All right, 2 questions left. Sujith Radhakrishnan writes, sorry man, I know I'm butchering your name. I'm doing my best. Poster for episode 9. Supreme Leader Kylo Ren in all of his excellency sitting on the First Order throne. I'm down for it. The Supreme Leader is dead. All hail the Supreme Leader. I'm down for that poster. And last, Maja Norbai just sends in a super chat, and I appreciate that, Naja. Well, thanks a lot. That'll do it for all the super chats. You know what? We are over time, but I said I would try to take a couple of Twitter questions, and I'm going to do that right now, even though my throat is just about dead. And you know what? It's not going to work. My Twitter feed isn't working. My Twitter feed app that I use to bring in my Twitter questions right now is not working. So I apologize about that, guys. Here, I'll show you exactly what's happening here. I'm opening up my Twitter feed, and I'm getting this... this feed here. Let me see if I can bring this up on the screen so you guys can see what I'm talking about. I'm getting this notice saying, I can't show it to you now because it's not going to let me open it. I'm getting this notice saying it's not working right now. My apologies. No Twitter questions. I didn't check that in advance. I should have. I apologize for that. Okay. That will do it for me, guys, for this episode of Star Wars Talk Tuesdays, the best day of the week. I'm so glad you guys decided to join me. I love sitting around talking Star Wars, even when we disagree with each other. That's the most fun. And I hope you guys understand, too. If I say things here that you totally disagree with, it's totally meant as a fellow fan. I'm just giving my point of view. Doesn't mean you shouldn't believe what you believe. You believe what you believe because that's how the movies hit you. I'm just here to be a part of the conversation. I love engaging with you guys. This is the best. I cannot wait to do Star Wars Talk Tuesday again next Saturday. So special thank you to all you guys who are here watching live. If you're not watching live, leave a comment or a thought in the comment section below. I'm sure there's lots of stuff to talk about. That'll do it for me, guys. Thanks so much for joining me. My name's John Campea, and until the next video, bye-bye.